Okay.
Good.
So first thing we're going to do is smile for the camera.
Okay, here I am. And there are
Okay.
you.
So welcome, everybody. If you know me, you know how unbelievably excited I am for this conversation today with Elyse Resch, like Fresh, who is a nutrition therapist in private practice in Beverly Hills, California, with over 38 years. We just realized 39 years of experience, specializing in eating disorders, intuitive eating, and health at any size. First and foremost, she wrote a book. If you haven't heard of it, I'm not sure what you're doing on the podcast, but I'm happy you're here, called Intuitive Eating, a revolutionary anti-diet approach. It's sitting next to me on my desk. I've just spent the last 2 weeks reading it and loving it in many ways and have so many questions about it. But while we're at it, she's also the author of the Intuitive Eating Workbook for Teens and the Intuitive Eating Journal, your guided journey for nourishing a healthy relationship with food, and the Intuitive Eating Workbook, the card deck, all the things. All things intuitive eating. And what
Chicken
a movement.
soup for the soul.
You know what I mean? Chicken soup for the intuitive soul. And what a movement you've created, and helped so many people find freedom. Truly amazing. And thank you so much for coming and talking to me today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
Can you give us the reader, because time is our great commodity. So we want to get to the definition and sort of your quick and dirty on what intuitive eating is, first and foremost.
Yes, sure. So it's a self-care, weight-inclusive process that's based on 10 guidelines. They're called principles, but they're not rules by any means, to help people get reacquainted with that internal wisdom they were born with about eating, because the majority of people are born with everything they need to know about eating. But I've got a better definition that I love, which is intuitive eating is a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. So what does that mean? It's based on the development of the brain. So back in the day of dinosaurs, they had only one brain function, which was survival. So they had instinct. That was the instinctual part of the brain. And they didn't have feelings, they didn't have thoughts. And then when mammals came around, we got another layer of brain functioning called the mammalian or the limbic brain. And that's the seat of emotions and social behaviors. So anyone who has pets knows that they have feelings. They just can't talk about their feeling. Well, maybe they can make sounds, but they don't have cognitive thought. I guess. And what differentiates us as humans is the neocortex, or the cognitive part of the brain. So intuitive eating encompasses all three parts. And there's a misconception out there that intuitive eating is simply instinct. Your body will just tell you, you never have to think about it. You never have to take into consideration emotions or anything. And that's not true.
No, your book actually talks at length about that. And I've actually have most of the questions I have are really in that area. Your book, actually, can I just quickly say, because something you talk about in your book is all different kinds of eaters, right? And you talk about the diet rebel, which I want to just get right to, because I think a lot of my listeners are diet rebels. And I don't know if you're on social media or
a little bit. I'm on Instagram. I'll put pictures of spaghetti that I've eaten in Italy and fun things. I'm not.
Well, your movement is something else on Instagram, Elyse. Let me tell you. Okay, and my experience of it a little bit is more diet rebel than what your book is expressing. It's a lot of.
I love it.
Cupcakes for breakfast, like eat all the peanut butter. And after really getting in with your book, it's like, that's not what you're talking about at all in this book, is that.
So the diet rebel is really the representation of why diets don't work.
Absolutely.
Because I'm very much about inner child work. I do a lot of that in my practice. And I believe that every one of us, no matter what age, carries with us that toddler/teen that doesn't like to be told what to do.
Defiance.
And so, defiance. I mean, that's what happens all over the world in so many ways. And so when someone goes on a diet, even if they create it themselves, they're creating it based on what they've learned in diet culture. So it's not really an internalized process. Eventually, that very, very healthy autonomous part, the rebellious teen comes out and says, yeah, no more. I'm not doing this anymore. The problem is people think that they're failures then. They believe there's something wrong with them because they can't stay on the diet. And I frequently say to people, you are not a failure at dieting. You are a success at ego development. Because if you're, having developed a healthy ego, you're not going to be told what to do. You're not going to be sucked into some cult. You are your own person. So the diet rebel is the part of you that actually helps you not diet anymore.
But I think my question is more also around
about the eating,
the idea that I think what the movement, and this is my experience of it, and I think I sort of have the people who I treat and love behind me saying, because I think what they're saying is if you're not having if you don't think like you should have a cupcake for breakfast, and that's really diet culture. And if you don't think that you can be standing and just eating the peanut butter out of the jar, then like that's diet culture. And as you read the book, that's actually maybe emotional eating. And and this is what I know as an eating disorders professional, this thing is so parsed, right? This thing is so parsed. And that's really, I think, what your book is saying too, to be honest. Like this thing is so parsed and so exact and so individualized. And I wonder what you think about that, because I don't think that is
and nuanced, very
beyond
nuanced. Okay, so when you're beginning the process, especially if you've come off of one or many different diets, the freedom to eat whatever you want carries that rebellious part of you that was on the diet and has you eating everything in sight for a while. But that is not part of intuitive eating as you go on. That's a process that you get through when you finally trust yourself. Because so often people will say, I'll try this intuitive eating thing out. And if it doesn't work, well, there's that, and I don't want to even name the other diets around, the diets, not other diets. So, but once you're really invested in this and understand you cannot live another day in your life following some, rules that somebody else has put out, you get to that point where you really trust that you can have whatever it is that you want when you want it. And what ends up happening is it's no longer forbidden. It's no longer as exciting. It's part of your everyday eating. And you don't need to eat the whole jar of peanut butter or have the cupcake for breakfast. Actually, I was doing, with my co-author, I was doing a big talk a couple of years ago in Philadelphia. 2,000 people, young dietitians, came to this. And our moderator came in with a box of donuts. And she said, here, you want one? And I said no to it, not because of restriction. I had already eaten breakfast. I knew I needed to nourish myself before I went. I wasn't hungry, and it just didn't appeal to me at the time. So I said no to it. It's when I was in Portland, Oregon, and went to Voodoo Donuts, I definitely bought a delicious lemon donut there. So it's about individuation. It's about individual needs, and it's about trusting that you'll always be able to give it to yourself. So you don't have to have it all this moment. Does that clarify it a bit? Or
it does. I mean, I have 10,000 more questions where this one came from. It does as it pertains, frankly, like to you who's been doing this for like a really long time. I guess my first question, I mean, I've already asked 7 questions, but my first question is like, are there people that you think that intuitive eating doesn't work for? Or do you think it works for every single person?
I think only the people who are still invested in weight loss while they're doing intuitive eating. That intuitive eating will not work for them because their focus is weight loss, which disconnects them from intuitive eating. So really go ahead.
No.
It's okay. It's on the tip of your tongue.
No, there's a lot of questions on the tip of my tongue.
Okay. So to be fully engaged in intuitive eating, you have to trust that you want that freedom that comes with that wisdom in your body and trusting the wisdom. And now this is a term I use a lot, which is radical acceptance.
Yes.
Our bodies are DNA programmed to be a certain height. Nobody, some people don't like their height, but they know they can't do anything about it. So they accept it. Their eye color, well, I guess they could use colored contact lenses, but they're not, changing their body. But people think that they can control or manipulate or make their weight something that it's not genetically programmed to be.
Well, I guess I wonder if that's on both sides of it though, right? I mean, I weighed 325 pounds at one time in my life, and that was absolutely not the weight I was supposed to be at, promise you that. Right. So I really hear what you're
Oh,
saying. And I
that
think the
yeah,
chapter on exercise in this book is beautiful, right? It's like, hey,
movement, right?
it's
Movement.
healthy.
Yes,
Like it's healthy, do it that
yes,
way. Let's not do it the other way. You know,
yes.
I guess, my first question, my 18,000th question,
Mhm.
I wonder, just with the advances in the research. I just had Michael Moss on the show, who just wrote a book called Hooked about the food addiction
Oh
in the food
dear.
industry, right? Oh,
Yeah,
it's a
I
great
don't
book.
believe that at all. I don't
Oh,
believe one iota of that.
you
So,
don't
okay.
believe it at all.
I don't believe in food addiction at all.
Tell me
Not
more.
one bit. Well, any of the studies that have been done on food addiction do not look at the restraint that people have had, the dieting that they've had, the forbiddenness they've had of
Mhm,
particular foods. So then when
mhm.
they're given access to it, they feel like they can't stop eating it because it's an outcome of having restricted it. They also don't look at the fact that, so sure, our dopamine levels rise when we eat something delicious and satisfying, and satisfaction is a huge part of intuitive eating. Well, our dopamine levels rise when we have sex. Our dopamine levels rise when we listen to music. Dopamine rises as part of being human. And
Well,
so that does not prove that it's an addiction like a drug, which may raise dopamine levels as also. So you
interestingly, in
can't
the in
just,
the in the book, I think he's talking somewhat about the food, but I think he's actually talking about a more comprehensive and a vulnerability in a lot of ways, right? Like the food that we were eating when there were dinosaurs is not the food that we're eating today. I mean, there's a
correct,
multi-trillion dollar industry that does
correct.
nothing but create food for us to want and crave and eat more of it. It's actually how they make money. And I am as anti-diet as you are, right? Like, 'cause I love the
Uh-huh,
parts in the book where, and suddenly Heinz buys Weight Watchers, and a new
yeah,
marriage of abusing us has been created.
uh-huh,
But I think
uh-huh.
that there is this pretty undoubtable research just in food labs that says, hey, we're going to make this food. And I wonder where you stand with that, to say that this food overrides restriction, non-restriction. It's just more powerful than all of us.
I think as a committed intuitive eater, someone who is so in touch with their inner world, in touch with their emotions, you can give them any food. I don't care whether it's engineered to get you to want more. They stay mindful and present when eating. They eat as much of it as they want. They know they can have it whenever they want. And there's a point at which I'm done. I don't even
Yeah.
feel like it.
Yeah.
And there's a concept in intuitive eating called habituation, which basically means the greater the stimulus, the less the response. So the more you have of something, after a while, you just become habituated to it and it's not as exciting. So maybe when that new product comes out that somebody designs to, get you in to be able to eat it and spend money on it, it might be really exciting for the first month, maybe. Eat it every day, eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And there's a point at which it's like, okay, I can always go buy that. So I don't buy into that. And I don't, we've had, by the way, we have over 130 or maybe 140 studies by now
Mhm.
validating intuitive eating as
Sure.
an
Listen,
evidence-based process.
absolutely. Absolutely. I hear you. I guess I live more in the, if somebody tells you that there's one way runaway model, right? I think, and I guess my main question is this, because I obviously have 1,000 questions, but when I think, listen, I think it's amazing what you've done personally, right? Like when you're like, listen, the stimulus is gone. I wonder where things like endocrine system comes into account here, and nervous system comes into account here, and
Hmm.
trauma comes into account here. I think the precision in
Absolutely.
which we're asking people to be intuitive is hard to get to in a very non-intuitive society, right?
Well, this is why I'm talking about that dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. I'm very trauma informed. If someone has had serious trauma, they really need help to deal with the trauma. If they're choosing food to comfort themselves, so be it. Thank goodness it got them through a really hard time. Some people think that intuitive eating says absolutely no emotional eating. Well, we're born with the understanding that that sugar in the milk is so comforting. As soon as the baby's born and, gets a bottle or a breast and there's lactose in there, it's comforting. This baby comes out of the safe womb and into the lights and the crazy world, and they have food and they're comforted by the food. So I see
Absolutely.
nothing wrong with the idea that food is something that can comfort us. And if a person's in that stage of life where there's no other coping mechanisms, especially when trauma happens, often they're young, later too, but often they're young and they don't have the resources and they may not have the family support, and all they've got is food. I mean, I did that when I was a kid. I know when I look back at my childhood, food was such a comfort to me. I'm so glad I had that food.
Absolutely.
So,
I guess I've seen
yes, there's
people
all
in
these other
my
factors.
practice, which, listen, we're on different sides of the aisle. I love when I have conversations with, I love these conversations. I'm a harm
Mhm.
reduction, food addiction person, and I'm so honored to be able to get here to sit here and talk to you about it. I think I've seen, and I really want to say, kind of like in the spirit of America, you know, we agree on a lot of stuff. And I really need to say that because of the current
Yes.
state of America, the red state,
Oh,
the blue state of all of it, like
yes. Oh,
dieting, diet concept, diet culture. It has harmed my soul and the soul of the thousands and thousands and thousands that people that I've treated. I think what I've seen and what you're saying is in reading your book is, hey, let it all out, let the rebel out, let them all out, let them eat till they're done eating. And then you're going to find some of your own internal structure and have it come back. I think what I've seen is that people continuing to eat until they get sick and then going back and then going back and really not feeling like they can stop. And I'm not into rules. I love, one of the words I hate the most in this world is the word boundaries. They're so
oh,
harsh,
okay.
like harsh.
Uh-huh,
I love the word like
uh-huh.
limit. Just like, when you're saying they're not rules, they're guidelines. Like, yes, because you and I both know that at the end of the day, the only thing that works is self-determining, right? That's actually the only piece of research that's across the board in any of our
Yes,
work, right? Is
yes,
you got to make the choice, right? The why of it all.
right.
So I think when I'm experiencing people, they have kind of burned out endocrine systems. They're usually in some kind of metabolic syndrome, sometimes type 2 diabetes, they're so thirsty, like, and the dopamine levels have been pretty burned out and exhausted too. And they
Uh-huh.
feel like they can't stop eating. And so giving some guidelines around, and I think they're eating foods that many times are what we're talking what the book Hooked is talking about, what the food process, like foods that are made to have you want more, and they
Right.
don't have these skills that you're talking about. They don't have this.
Oh, that's right. That's why they need you. That's why they need people like you to help
Absolutely.
them with those deep wounds, with the trauma, with the pain. I mean, if there's somebody in the world who has no access to, comfort in many ways, especially counseling right now, of course, that food is going to be the one thing that they can go to that's reliable, that's cheap some of the time. Some of those foods that are made are, inexpensive to buy. And can they ultimately become intuitive eaters? Absolutely. And they need other help. It's not just food.
So there's no part of you that thinks that the that highly processed food hijacks the brain to make you not be able to have a really hard time stopping. You think that we can be more
Right.
powerful than that.
Absolutely.
How do we
I
get more
just, I,
power? How would you propose we get more powerful than that?
well, I mean, it's really what you were saying about what's going on in the world today, the oppression in our world, the marginalization of people, includes people in larger bodies that are stigmatized and scared to be out there, scared to go to the doctor because they think that the doctor's going to say you've got to lose weight. They
Yeah.
feel fat
Well, the
shamed.
medical field
They
is
don't want
really
to.
under
Oh
educated
yeah.
about dieting. I think my question is more about, do you not think that so you think that how do we, like, if you don't have the time and you don't have the energy. I mean, I love this story in the book of a woman who, was nourishing and nurturing herself with food in a way that sort of wasn't in line with her. And, and she was able to ask her husband to watch the kids for 30 minutes and it helped her to
Right.
stop binging. But while I was reading that as a eating disorders therapist, I was like, gosh, I mean, that sometimes takes 6 years of therapy, you know? What do we do in the midst
Exactly.
of that when people are eating and like harming themselves with this food that maybe you don't, but many argue, and there's a lot of data and science that supports,
Mhm.
is at least created to be addictive. I mean, what do we do in the meantime? If you
Well,
if you're what if your husband's not like, what
well,
if your husband's like, yeah, sorry, go deal with it. Like,
well, sure. A lot of people don't have they don't have the financial means. They don't have to get time off from their kids. They don't have the familial need. There's a
right.
lot of that.
Well,
But
that
if
that
we
that
can take away their shame, this is important, Molly. If we can take away their shame for going to these foods, whatever they are, to that are comforting them, and have them look at how they feel when they eat that. If they're doing it for self-destruction, that's a something for them to understand that food is not for harming ourselves. Food is for nourishing ourselves,
right.
nourishing our mind, body, and soul. And I
Absolutely.
think so much
Absolutely.
is propelled by the shame they feel about their bodies, the shame they feel about their food choices. So when they think, oh, that food, if I buy that food, I'm just going to be programmed to keep eating it, and then they want it anyway because it tastes good, then they keep eating it, not because necessarily it's programmed to make you want to eat more and more and more, but because they feel so bad about themselves for even wanting it to begin with. So then they think, well, I shouldn't buy it, and as soon as they shouldn't buy it, then the next time they get access to something that they add to the list of things they shouldn't have, boom, they're out of control binging, and it just,
Yeah, I
it's
guess,
what makes the situation worse.
but I think this is the confusing piece to me, because in the book you're saying that comfort food can be destructive, but it's also okay if you can eat it if you're in touch with your satiety and you're eating it without guilt, but
No,
also
no,
that
no, no,
eating
no, no, no.
but also that
Not
eating to numb
exactly.
out and other forms of severe emotional eating can be really harmful. I guess I'm just
There's
really
a
confused.
continuum, as
Mhm.
you know, with anything that anyone's going through. There's a continuum of emotion. So the primary emotion that goes with eating is satisfaction. It's a feeling of happiness. Food is delicious. Then it can move to some comfort, just from, I would
Yeah.
say,
Like the baby in
the
the bottle. I'm
emotional.
with you. Yeah, the baby
Yeah.
in the
Okay.
bottle. Totally.
As it continues on the continuum to the very end point of self-destruction, that's no longer comfort eating. That's
Okay.
no longer even numbing eating. That is harming oneself. That's no
Mhm.
different than cutting oneself. That's no different
Absolutely.
than using drugs or alcohol. It's a self harm. And intuitive eating is about self care, not
Right.
self harm.
Right.
So we have to think, as you were saying earlier, this is nuanced. I mean, this is, or I mean, maybe I said that, this is not just all or nothing. This is not, okay, food is all comfort and you can use food all the time for everything. No, it's staying present. Am I having this food because it's comforting? And now you're going to say, well, what if you start eating some of that food that is programmed to make you keep eating more of it? If you're if you're fully embraced in intuitive eating and trusting your body, you will ultimately get to that point. And I'm going to give you an example where it's like, okay, enough of it. I had a client yesterday, wonderful client I adore, who has been dieting all of her life, terrible body dysmorphia, her weight up and down, weight cycling, and hating herself, and really harming herself with the way that she was eating. And she said to me yesterday, we've been working together a few months, where she thought she was all full blown intuitive eater. And then she realized, wait, I still have some more work to do. And she said, I bought those peanut butter filled pretzels from Whole Foods, and I love them. And I ate the whole bag, and I felt so awful afterwards.
Mhm.
Then I'm like, done. I don't feel like having any more. So she was being a little diet rebel at first. Okay, I can eat all this. She still had that in there. And then at the end of that, and one might say that would be a food that would make you want to keep going. There's sugar, there's salt, there's fat,
I don't know, because I've treated that person too, and I've had that story happen, and then I've seen that story happen as punctuated through the history of their life. And I've also seen people who say, yeah, that food is not in alignment with me. And I take the research on, sugar hitting the endocrine system and the nervous system seriously. Or I actually don't love that. I don't want to say it in that way. I take it
Okay.
I take it in that I've seen it really help people that I've treated. And just transparently, I haven't had sugar or flour in 12 years, but not as a diet, because we are in such deep and utter agreement in that anytime that it's creeps back in, it's like, oh, what an exciting, truly, what an exciting and interesting data point for me to review about what was going on for me, that I made this choice
Correct.
that went like, that just doesn't work for me. The other thing, just from a sciencey perspective, is, and I wonder what you think about this as a like as a research as a scientist, like anytime that I have and clients that I treat have put the sugar back in their system, I mean, the kind of sick that I get the next day is pretty serious. Like, it's really, it feels like a
My
drink.
question to you about that, does that mean you put a little bit of brown sugar on your oatmeal and you feel sick, or you start eating sugar and you eat a lot more of it because you haven't had it in a long time? Are we
I
talking
think
about a little bit, or are
no,
we
you know
talking
what?
about a lot?
Actually, no. We're talking about a little bit. We're talking about maybe being at a restaurant and having there be like a trace amount of sugar in something, and just really feeling it, or going, what I give up all my sugar stuff. Like if I go to sushi, right? I'm like, there's sugar in the rice, like we'll deal with this. But I do find myself not feeling so well after it. Not like anything except, but just being mindful of that.
So there's something called, and I'm not refuting what you're feeling, but there is something called the nocebo effect. And you've, I'm sure, heard of the placebo effect, where you think that something is going to make you feel better, and you're given, like in studies, they'll give people a sugar pill. Well, forget the sugar. They'll give them a little pill that something that doesn't have what they told them, what they thought was going to be in it, to make them feel good. And they feel great. This is the mind-body experience. When you think something's going to make you feel good, you feel great. On the other hand, when you think something's going to make you feel bad, mind-body is very powerful, and you may feel bad. I'm not refuting that.
So we're saying,
how much of it is?
It's the no. So anytime I eat sugar and the next day I have the hangover, it's in my mind.
Well, because you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to have that sugar. I want that sushi. I want whatever the sugar's in. I want that. I'm probably not going to feel great tomorrow. And then you don't feel great tomorrow.
What if I had would you agree, like if I had diabetes and that was a nocebo effect, or I had type 2 diabetes?
Well, for people with diabetes, if they're insulin dependent, they take enough insulin to deal with the sugar.
What about metabolic
syndrome? If they're not
syndrome?
insulin dependent?
What if I had metabolic syndrome? That would be the nocebo.
Well,
it would be a nocebo effect.
A big part of intuitive eating is interoceptive awareness, meaning listening to all the signs your body gives you. So I know for my clients who have diabetes, who have, let's say, not even insulin,
we'll just play metabolic syndrome. We'll play it light.
Okay. So when they eat in ways that are balanced, when they have meals on a regular basis every few hours, and the meals have everything in it, they've got protein, they've got fat, they've got carbs, they feel so much better than if they just have a pastry for breakfast, let's say, and a cup of coffee. So the caffeine and the sugar that hits their brain. Now, see, this is something you didn't mention that I want to say, is that blood sugar is highly affected by the sugar that you eat. So, meaning blood sugar is the sugar in our bloodstreams that most people who don't have diabetes are able to have regulated sugar levels. So they eat, and about 3 hours later, their blood sugar starts to drop, and they crave food. They're hungry, and they eat. Okay. So if you just eat a big hit of sugar, it's going to raise your blood sugar sky high, and then your insulin gets secreted and you crash.
But what if that's what my intuition is saying? But what if that's what my intuition's saying? I mean, that's I think where my confusion is, right? Like,
okay, what's your intuition? Tell me what your intuition's saying there.
Saying I want to have a big Danish for breakfast right now.
Okay. So I will give you an example. It was my birthday a couple of years ago, and I had 2 big, beautiful cakes in my refrigerator. One of them I knew about.
I think when we're using you as the example, my issue is just when we're using you as the example, you have 39 years of this. Like, I want to use like Mary on the street as our example.
Right. I want to be able to help people think in the way that I think.
So love that.
That's the point. Okay. So here I am. I've got these cakes. I wake up the day after my birthday. I want cake for breakfast. I'm also about to drive an hour to go see my son. I know that if I just eat a big piece of cake for breakfast and my coffee, I will my blood sugar's going to crash. I don't want to crash my car. So I say to myself, I'm going to have a piece of cake and I'm going to have a banana and peanut butter and a glass of milk. So I want to help people understand the science, understand how that works, and adjust in a way that they'll feel good. So sure, just the cake isn't going to make them feel good.
I guess, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just going to ask anyway, but what is your take on leptin resistance? No.
Leptin?
Yeah. Like what's your take on leptin and the studies on leptin resistance?
Well, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is your hunger, hormone, and leptin is your fullness hormone.
Right.
So if you've been dieting for a long time, you've been weight cycling, your leptin levels go down, and you are not going to feel the fullness as readily as you would if you hadn't been dieting. This is one of the big dangers of dieting and weight cycling.
Absolutely, no doubt.
And in fact, that study.
But when you're coming out of that.
Loser,
right. Oh, I love that study. The studies on The Biggest Loser are some of my favorite ones in the world. Just proving us
the
right.
sad part is that there are some people who will never be able to recover from that, because the damage that dieting has done to them is that now at the level at which they were eating prior to all the weight loss, now they've regained all the weight, they're not satisfied. They need more food because their leptin levels are lower.
Totally. But I think, listen, I mean, part of, I listen to this, listen, I'm recovered. I have found like I live such a diet-free, beautiful life, and not eating sugar is an absolute choice to me. It doesn't feel anything other than that. But I always bring like my sickest self to the party. I always bring my sickest self to the podcast. Part of what I hear in this, and I want you to help me with this, part of what I hear in what you're saying, I need to try. I mean, it almost sounds like you need to try harder to get intuitive, when I don't think our society.
No, but you are intuitive.
I am
you
now.
Are intuitive.
I was not back then. And I needed a lot of structure and a lot of loving guidelines and a lot of, and frankly, I needed to remove certain foods in order to be able to see again. That's been my experience of this, which I know that we are on different sides of the aisle about, but that's, and I think if I had been continuously I don't know what would have happened to me, right? When my body signals weren't working, how was I to get in touch with them if I was in that much, like, and I want to say like the kind of morbid obesity pain that I was in on top of it. Like I couldn't wait another minute for my intuition eventually kicked in. Let me tell you, just not through the ways that you're writing about, right? It was like, in the beginning, it was like, I needed a lot of guidelines because I couldn't see straight.
Well, sure. I mean, a little kid needs help to learn how to walk. First, you hold their hands and they walk across the room with your hands, and eventually they hold onto the couch. Of course, when we're in such pain and in such emotional pain, physical pain too, of course, we need a lot of help with it. But let me tell you a little bit about my own history, because I had an eating disorder. Can I ask you one
more question about that while we're there? Because I think that's true. Like, I wouldn't say that giving up sugar is for everybody. Like, by no means, actually. I really don't think that. But in that same way, I actually don't think intuitive eating is for everybody. And that's not what you're saying. You're like, intuitive eating is absolutely for everybody. But
wait, some people have developmental delays and they can't be in touch with their signals. So when I say everybody, I mean, I'm not talking about cases where people are, they've got complications in that way that they're born with.
I mean, I'm developmentally delayed in my opinion, because I don't have those skills. I'm not kidding at all. I'm like, I couldn't be kidding less. But I've worked on a lot of teams, and I've worked in patient settings and all of that. And I mean, when somebody comes to treatment for their eating disorder, it's not intuitive eating. It's actually structured. Yeah, but so it isn't for everybody. If you're deeply entrenched in anorexia, it's not, right? If you're,
you see, it's that for everybody, but at what point can it be for?
But that's a big deal.
In that moment, in fact, there's this narrative out there in the eating disorder world, and I'm a certified eating disorder RD, and I've been working with eating disorders for this entire time of my practice.
Me too.
That you can't use intuitive eating with someone not recovering from anorexia, because if you tell them to eat when they're hungry, they'll never eat. Well, that's true. You cannot tune into your body's signals until your body's healed. But there's 10 principles of intuitive eating. So if you're working on the other 8 principles And ultimately, as the person's renourished, as the brain is renourished, then they start to get accurate hunger and fullness.
But I think, I actually agree. So to me, like, I use a term that's like humble eating. Like, to me, I do humble eating. Like, I acutely understand that for me, like, and lots of people I treat, like, sugar, flour don't work for me, but I'm not like getting my scale out in the morning to like make sure. I'm like 2 eggs, 3 eggs, 1 egg, 2, whatever, like, and I'm able to negotiate that. But that took and what you're saying, I think, is really important. That took a really long time for me to be able to get there. I mean, and I would tell you in the beginning, I'd be like, I'm weighing my food the rest of my life. Like, don't you? And then like a day I was like, you know what? Let me try to trust myself today, because I had garnered some trust along the way because of the guidelines I was given. And again, I don't want to say I've seen intuitive eating work for a lot of people, but I've seen a lot of people lose their relationship with themselves, maybe needing a different intervention.
Well, it's an introduction to being tuned into their bodies that they need. It's an introduction to how to nourish their bodies and their brain. It's a way of healing the body and the brain. Absolutely. Because they haven't been in any place where they were able to do that. So you help them, like in a residential treatment program for eating disorders. People need to be fed because they're so undernourished. Their brains are undernourished.
Even binge eaters, though, right? It's not just the anorexics. I mean, the binge eaters are on like a 3-meal, 1 snack, like meal plan, learning a little bit more of a diabetic exchange.
Well, I'm not so much for the exchanges, more the general.
Me neither. Yeah. But I think me neither at all. But I think when you're relearning, it's a good model, right? And then once you can get your like awareness back, when you're saying a fat, a protein, a carbohydrate, like that's the diabetic exchange, right?
Well, it depends. Well, but you see, it depends on how it's presented. If someone is told that it's a rule, you have to have this exact amount of this, and this exact amount of that, and you should measure it. It's a problem. I've had people come out of treatment completely physically healed. Their symptoms are gone, and they are so eating disordered in their brains, in their heads, that they've got a lot of work to do to work toward trusting their bodies.
Yes, of course. But I think but the structure, but the internal, of course. I mean, gosh, this is, by the way, bless us in this industry, right? Because it is so one size doesn't fit all. And it's a lot of bad treatment out there, right? And I think also maybe not even bad treatment, but the key doesn't fit into the hole, and then we slam the key into the hole.
Well, yeah, we have to. Everything has to be individualized. There are many treatment programs that are founded on intuitive eating, and what they do, they don't just start the patients who come in, let's say residential, and say, go, just eat whatever you want, as much as you want, as little as you want. Of course not. So we need education, we need scientific understanding, and we need to see, what does it look like to have I won't even call it normal eating, but to have the kind of eating that nourishes your body and your brain. So, so at first,
there's so many people that can't like afford going to residential and maybe need it, but then maybe need more structure when they're starting, or maybe need to stay away from these. I mean, you wouldn't agree with this piece, of course, but like stay away from these foods that are, designed to make them want more, and then maybe add it in when their brain's a little quieter.
The problem is then what builds up is the restriction. I can't have this food until my brain is better. I can't be trusted with this food until my brain is healed. And okay, so it's avoided and they get more nourished, but they've been building up all that restrictive thinking. And then when it gets introduced, they binge. Inevitably.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. I just went to sushi for the first time in a year, and it was like, I overate it. It was amazing, and I was like, all right, good. Next. Everybody has such like a working, I think, I don't know that we have a scientific definition of what deprivation and restriction is. What would you say yours is?
Okay. It comes from several places. There's physiological deprivation. Your body's just not getting enough energy in it. There's neurochemical deprivation. Your brain is in primal hunger, like the survival part of the brain of the dinosaurs is red alert, not getting enough, and that will send out chemicals to get you to binge. There's emotional deprivation, because or psychological deprivation, when you think you shouldn't eat certain foods and you start to build up a craving for what it is that you are told you can't have. If you're, see what you're saying, Molly, for you, you've come to something on your own that works for you. And I would never
my
fight
own.
with
I have
that.
like a whole, no, it's not just my own. Like I have a whole, like I have a whole treatment center. Like it's not just like, I am scientist enough to not have the audacity to sit and say, well, I'm one person. Like I've seen this work for thousands of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Listen, we're on different sides of that. We're on different. This is exciting. I wish that the country would have conversations like this, Elyse. I really do.
Well,
like,
right.
Because I have to tell you, and what I want to say in that, like, Spears, like, I don't disagree. I think we are saying a lot of similar things, right? I am talking to these people out there who are lost and suffering, and I just want them to hear a variety of ideas about how this can be done. Right. And I think there are, and so I really hear what I hear these definitions. I guess my question is, just to go to your birthday cake morning, like, is there a case to be made that says, maybe I shouldn't have this birthday cake, even if I want it, because I need to drive and it's the morning and I'm just going to have the banana and I'll have it later?
Never, because if I don't have it, then when I come home, I'm going to want 5 pieces of it. No. And it doesn't hurt me to have, I mean, I'm exaggerating at the moment, but it doesn't hurt me to have that piece of cake as long as I have the banana with a lot of peanut butter and a glass of milk. If I just have the banana, it won't
what if
hold
that
me
makes
through
you
either.
like super, I mean, just that much food, like, makes me tired, like how much food that is for me. Like I'd need to take a nap. I wouldn't be able to drive, not even with the sugar of it all. I'd just be like, wow, that's like a lot of food.
Well, so you know yourself about what you need. Everybody needs a different, I need a lot of breakfast. I had a lot of breakfast this morning.
Yeah. I mean, breakfast, like my absolute most favorite meal, like cake wouldn't even appeal to me. I can't get to the Ezekiel bread fast enough, to be honest with you. I love it. I love what I eat. But I guess like, I don't know.
I guess what I want to say, Molly.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm
well,
like in love with this
to give you a little.
I am.
I just want to give you a little more history, my own personal history.
Tell me
what brought me to this and where I am with it. Okay, so it was in my late 20s and early 30s where I decided I wanted to lose a little bit of weight before I got pregnant again with my second child. Well, that started me down a rabbit hole of a lot of terrible things. First of all, I started dieting. I started losing weight. I couldn't get pregnant again. And no doctor asked me, are you eating enough? Are you losing weight? I found out later when I started graduate school, actually, after that even a 1 pound weight loss a week can cause infertility. So in any case, that's what got me into it. And then I started restricting, not afterwards, but I was restricting and continued to restrict. And then I started binging out of control. Yeah. I could not stop binging. Very different than the comfort food I ate as a kid when I'd come home from school and wanted, chips and whatever. This was true binging. And the feelings I had of shame and the feelings I had that there was not enough food to fill my body and that I would never be able to stop eating. And I didn't understand. I hadn't been in therapy yet. I didn't know. I hadn't dealt with my trauma from my childhood. I didn't know what it was all about. And the good news was, as I started graduate school, I started to learn the science. I started therapy. I made some big changes in my life, and I stopped restricting. And stopping restricting my binging, I have not binged in 40 years.
That's amazing.
40 years? I haven't binged in probably 45 years. So
the numbers really go quickly, don't they?
Yeah, very quickly. So I just turned 76. So
first of all, like, you look great. I mean, that is not the number I would guess. I'm sorry. Just had to put that in there.
Yeah, thank you. So I know from my own personal experience that the restriction, both physiological, neurochemical, and emotional restriction, led me to being an out of control binger with shame. I would sit on the dining room floor after my son at the time was in asleep. My ex-husband was asleep, and take things out of the freezer and just sit there and binge on them. Foods I wasn't letting myself eat during the day. I have no shame about it now. I have gratitude for the fact that I had an eating disorder. It led me into the field I'm in, and to be able to be empathic with my clients because I know what they're going through, and I went through it myself, and I'm a good role model for them in that. Once I healed it, that was it. No problems ever. And I eat anything I want to eat.
Well,
I
cake on
listen
your
to my,
birthday. I mean, look at that
yeah,
for
right.
breakfast.
I listen to my body. I listen
Yeah,
to my hunger, my fullness, my satisfaction. Satisfaction is a huge part of intuitive
I
eating, which
love
we
that.
haven't
And
even
I
talked
actually,
about. Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. No, I mean, that's actually, we are aligned on that because like, I
Yes.
mean, like if I don't have, and I say I like, and you say you mean everyone you treat. I say me, I mean everyone
Yeah.
I treat.
Right.
I mean, and I actually love this part of the book where you're like, if you're having avocado toast for breakfast and you really want that, you've really wanted oatmeal, like don't expect to feel satisfied that morning. And like, oh, I
Correct.
agree. I mean,
Correct.
it's like, I was about to have the salad for lunch today and I was like, no, like we are having a sandwich, like, like I don't have time to feel, to get into like an emotional, really, this emotional space. So like, I, I
We
really
could go
wish,
on for
but
hours,
don't you?
couldn't
I
we,
know. I
Molly?
was just thinking, like, should we make a multi-part of this? Because I'm not even coming close. But I just also want to say to America, we can have conversations where two people don't agree.
Yes.
And also, my favorite
Yes.
part of all of this is we agree on a lot of stuff, like diets don't work,
Right.
like, oh my
Right.
gosh, like, and I actually, even believe when you're considering your relationship with sugar. I know we don't agree on this. Like the only thing you have to commit to is like not doing the starting over BS, right? Like not this cutting and
Right.
running and the next diet and the next, like sit
Right.
down and have a relationship with food for a minute. Like sit
Mm-hmm.
down and look at it and talk to it and know about it, because the relationship between food and ourselves are linked because they're the only two ones that we have to
Right.
have.
Right.
You know, I know I also, and I guess we just agree to disagree on this, but I mean, I think that I've also seen in my years as an eating disorder therapist, like and also as a recoverer who sat in a lot of circles with a lot of people recovering from eating disorders, that we all recover really different ways. And I guess
Correct.
that's my question, like to me. And again, I actually, the part of my brain that's really committed to not eating sugar and flour is not a restrictive piece. It's a choice piece, right? I mean, it's not,
Okay.
I find it liberating, to be honest. Like I
Okay.
feel great and healthy, and I don't know. And so do, and I read letters that I get every day and I treat people and they're like, best
Mm-hmm.
choice I've ever made. So I don't think of that as restriction or deprivation by any means. Actually, I only think of it as liberating. And you would disagree with that. You would say, Molly, you really should be an intuitive eater and you should have, I mean, is that what?
Well, I'm saying that you're being an intuitive eater by listening to yourself and saying you feel better. The question is, what would you do if one day you broke it?
Oh,
How
I
would
would
you
just,
handle that?
oh my gosh, I would be so fascinated to understand what was going on with me emotionally, and maybe have to get a new trauma therapist. I don't know. I mean, the last thing I would do, and if anybody learn one thing from this, because this is Elyse and I both telling you this, I would not restrict, I would not diet, I would not harm myself, I would not shame myself,
No.
like 0%. Like that is a part of being a human being, I don't know. I would be so curious and so compassionate and fascinated to know what happened. And maybe it was just
So
like, I wanted to try it. Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah, and when I say broke it, I don't mean have a binge. I mean
Yeah.
like you had the sushi that had sugar in it. What do you do?
I don't think twice about that. I just want to have the sushi, and it's really good sushi. And who wants to have
So you
sashimi
see,
when
you're
you could have
not
delicious sushi?
100% restricting yourself of any food that might have a drop of sugar in it.
No, I'm a
See,
harm
that's different.
reductionist. I'm a harm
Okay, so
reductionist.
that's different than people who absolutely will not have one drop, and then they find out that something that they ate that they didn't have sugar, that they thought
Right.
didn't have sugar in
Oh
it,
yeah.
they find out it had it in, and then they're just like
Yeah.
all over the
Oh my
place.
goodness. Well, to be honest, at least the reason I wrote my book, Secret, is because everybody thinks of food addiction treatment like you're talking about. And that's not a life. That's the life the size of a postage stamp. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
That's the life, and I think you find that. So for me, oh, I'm so with you on that one too. Yeah. I'm not like bringing my
Yeah.
scale to dinner. Like I'm here to eat dinner. Like,
So you're not talking about it in all or nothing ways. You're talking about it. My
in a
4
choice.
favorite words are for the most part, for the most part, for the
Well,
most
yeah.
part,
I
for
would
the
say,
most part.
I'd say for the all part, and then sometimes, every now and then. I'd say every now and my favorite 4 words, Every now and then.
Every now and then. So that's still not absolutist, you see.
I don't, well, I mean, gosh, I've been an addictions therapist long enough. I mean, honest to God, if you were like, Molly, you can never have sugar again, I'd be like, I'm coming over and eating that birthday cake out of your freezer, babe. I'm just telling you that right now. And of course, so I agree with that. I think where we differ is that I feel in my body that sense of it, and I've seen it. And I've seen when, I think more on the other end, I've seen when people take it out, even just for a short amount of time, they can restore easier. I think that's just where you say, eat what you want, and then the rules will follow. I say, hey, let's put some guidelines in, and then your intuition will follow.
There's no rules. No rules will follow.
I know we don't
there
use
are
that
no
word.
rules.
That is
no.
not a word.
No, what I say is listen to your body. Ask yourself how you feel. Ask yourself, are you satisfied? Ask yourself, is this the way you want to live? And if that's what you're doing, then you're doing what's right for you.
I swear I want to have a second podcast, because actually the whole thing I wanted to talk about today is how hard it is to do that. You know what I mean? Like that takes, and I've been a therapist for over 20 years. I don't know how that happened.
You're a kid.
Thank you. Maybe I will have cake for breakfast. No, just kidding. But I find that with life being as lifey as it is, getting all of those skills in, and I'm trained in dialectical behavioral therapy. I mean, I'm in it, like that is sometimes doing it simultaneously is a little bit easier for some people, and not all people. I mean, I've had people where I've said, hey, I think a different approach might be better for you. I think that's more like just where I come from too, is that, well,
I'm not absolutist. I'm just more.
But your door is really closed to there being any sort of addiction model. It sounds that way. Maybe I'm wrong.
My door is closed to there being any food addiction model.
Right.
That's where my door is closed to.
Yeah. Even though it works for some people, because you don't think that works.
Well, I'm not going to, I don't want to make a comment about all people. I just know the people I've worked with. And when they felt they were addicted to a certain food and they wouldn't eat any of it. And then when they did, they proved to themselves that they were addicted because they couldn't stop eating it, but they couldn't stop eating it because they were so deprived of it. I don't mean this in any way.
I truly mean this question. Do you feel that way about substance? Like, do you feel that way about alcohol? Like that
alcohol and drugs are addictive. No, I mean, people who are not able to intuitively drink certainly need to not drink. I mean, I'm a very strong supporter of not drinking or not using drugs.
I always think about who shows up at our door. You know what I mean? And I guess like I've treated so many people who have felt really harmed by an intuitive eating model, who get like so excited about a more of a harm reduction, a more of a structured model or whatever. And I just wonder if the people who are coming to you, which I agree with, like they got the wrong parent, right? Like they came to a model that didn't serve them. And then they're like, oh, thank God you're here. Like, I just wonder, I mean, we don't have enough. Life is long. So hopefully we can get all the data for it. I mean, I literally think we should just maybe have a podcast together and talk about this all day. We've just been chatting and chatting and chatting. I want to say how grateful I am to have conversations like this. I feel like it's all that matters. Like, you know what I mean? It's just all that matters. These are the conversations I think that really help people, because it's about, finding your own way. And I'm so grateful that you came on today.
Well, and it's about being respectful. It's about being respectful, and it's about listening to each other and recognizing we are not all exactly the same. And what works for you, I'm so happy for you that it works for you.
I'm so happy that it works for you. I mean, I really mean that. I really do.
Right,
I really do. And like, by the way, I'm so glad to know you now, and really grateful.
Yes,
I think I'm going to put you in my network if you don't mind.
Oh, I'd be happy to be associated and connected to you, Molly. That's great.
Yay.
Yes.
And the closing argument also is that like, I am so grateful that we agree on these really important things.
And the majority of it. I mean, we're really on the same page for the majority of it. There's just a little bit of difference.
I remember that when I got trained as an addiction therapist and I was sitting in a treatment center, and they said this thing, we're more the same than we are different. And I think we all can lose that, when we get so polarized, like we are. We're more, and like it's,
and there's there's such polarization in our world today, watching
in the
people,
eating disorder field. Don't even get me started. I mean,
politically, I mean,
the whole thing, right?
Watching the speech last night where everybody's clapping on one side of the room and nobody's clapping on the other.
I know, it's like, right. So look at us. We're just we're just crossing the aisles, you and me, Elyse. I'm really grateful for it. Thank you
In a
so
respectful
much.
way.
In a
Yes.
respectful way.
Oh,
And
you're so welcome.
And I consider you a friend now. So go team.
Well, I'm so happy to meet you. And
Thank
anytime you
you.
want me to come back on, I will be happy to. So
Careful what you
okay.
wish for. Yep.
Oh dear.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.